Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning to look at the adult care and the lead adult care worker apprenticeship programs. So just wanted to talk you through what the purpose of today is and what we're going to cover. So we're going to have a look at the on-programme element of the apprenticeship programme. We're going to look at the assessment gateway. We're going to look at endpoint assessment. Then we're going to look at who can deliver endpoint assessment, roles and responsibilities. We'll have a look at the fees for endpoint assessment and the resources to support you to deliver the gateway and endpoint assessment for your learners. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about today and familiarise yourself with is the adult care and the lead adult care worker. So the adult care is level 2, lead adult care worker is level 3. Very similar in the requirements of the end-to-end delivery and assessment. So we'll just have a look at this first. These are the requirements that you will be expected to deliver as part of the apprenticeship programme. So the first area that is of interest to you is initial assessment. I'm sure you all do your initial assessments for learners going on to the SACE frameworks. That will continue. As part of the initial assessment requirements now, you have to ensure that a DBS check has been carried out on the learner before you sign them up onto the programme. I'm sure for a lot of you that is something that you already do anyway. So again, just to make sure that when signing a learner up, you have to ensure the employer has done the DBS check. You need to have sight of that. You need to be ensured that that has been carried out. Okay, so the next part is the familiar part to us all, which is what's classed as the on-programme. So this is the learning and development that takes place before the gateway, before endpoint assessment. So this is where the learner is doing their on-the-job training. The learning and development and on-the-job training includes, for both standards, the level 2 or 3 diploma in health and social care. So again, all very familiar to you. All very health and social care diploma. The only other requirement that you will see now is the 20% off the job training. Now, that's always kind of been around within the SACE frameworks, within the guided learning, non-guided learning, etc., etc. But now the SFA are really applying this rule. So I'm sure most of you with your SFA contracts will be really clear and understanding of the off-the-job rule defined by the SFA, but I just wanted to go through it because in the other webinars that we've had lots of questions around off the job, what is off the job and what isn't, what is classed as off the job and what's not. Just going back to the off the job training requirements. So the SFA in their guidance define off the job as learning which is undertaken outside of the normal day-to-day working environment and leads towards the achievement of the apprenticeship. This can include training that is delivered at the apprentice's normal place of work, but must not be delivered as part of their normal working duties. Okay, so they need to have time away from work. And I know traditionally we assess, particularly if we go into the workplace and we observe the learner, we follow them around, or we sit in a quiet corner, ask questions, etc., etc. That's not defined as off-the-job training because that's within their normal work environment. So the off-the-job training must be directly relevant to the apprenticeship or the standard and could include the following: the teaching of theory, for example, lectures, role-playing, simulation exercises, online learning, practical training, shadowing, mentoring, industry visits and attendance at competitions, learning support and time spent writing assessments and assignments. So that's all defined as off the job, but it can't be done outside of the apprentice's normal working day. Time has to be set aside during their working day. Now, traditionally in some trades, learners will go on day release to college For this sector, that's just not really the norm. Employers are loath to allow learners out of the workplace for a couple of hours. So asking them to release a learner for a day is quite a struggle, really. So it's going to be interesting to see how you will work that off the job training requirement, and it will be the SFA. It is a requirement, and they will be looking at it as part of your contract. So just to be clear, what that off the job does not include, it does not include the English and maths functional skills because that's funded separately. So it doesn't include learning time for those. It does not include you completing progress reviews or on-program assessment, which is part of what you would normally do within the workplace, and training which takes place outside the apprentice's paid hours of work. So if the apprentice is going to be sent on a training course, if it's within their normal working day and they've been released to attend the training course, that counts. If they've attended a training course on a Saturday or a Sunday or an evening, which is outside of their normal working day, that does not count as off-the-job training. So I'm sure if you want further guidance, if you SFA website, there is clear guidance in their documents for training providers and employers for the apprenticeships. So really make sure that you are clear on that off the job, and within your initial assessments, you've allocated that off the job time, but more importantly, the conversations have been had with employers who need to know that they have to expect this. They have to expect the learner needs time away from the workplace to learn. And as I say, that will probably be a difficult conversation to have. Okay, so English and maths, again, nothing new there. The functional skills, if they are on a level 2 learner, they will be doing level 1. If they're a level 3 learner, they'll be doing the level 2 if they don't already have them. Also, as part of the on-program learning, before reaching the gateway, the apprentice needs to have completed the care certificate if they don't already have it. Now, as you all know, the care certificate replaced the common induction standards, so it really is the employer's responsibility to ensure the care certificate has been achieved. However, in the competitive marketplace that you will now be, a lot of providers, as part of the package that they are offering employers, are offering to deliver the care certificate. And at least if you offer to deliver the care certificate, you can assume that it's been done correctly, and you can make sure that you can map that within the values and behaviours, etc. So it's entirely up to you. You work with the employer to deliver, or you take the responsibility to deliver. Okay, so none of that's new to us. That's what we currently do with on program. We're delivering the learning, etc. The new part for you is the assessment gateway. So I'll talk about the gateway a little bit further and what it is and what your responsibilities are within the gateway. And then we'll look at endpoint assessment. Again, completely new for us, completely new for every apprenticeship. It's a further interrogation of the skills learnt whilst on program. So again, for both of these standards, we have two components. We have a situational judgment test and we have a professional discussion. The final part is the completion of the apprenticeship program. So for you, really, it's the three areas on the right-hand side that are more of a interest to you because they're all new for the sector. So the first thing that we'll talk about then is the on-program learning. Okay, so we'll look at the level 2 standard, which is the adult care worker. Now, I hope that you've all seen the standards, and I hope you've all seen the assessment plan that supports the standard for the level 2. If you haven't seen them, they're not Pearson documents, they are DFE documents. They are freely available on the .gov website. If you type in new apprenticeship standards, you will find the adult care worker standards there. So if you're not familiar with them, I would suggest you get them and you start looking at them and start looking at what you are expected to deliver within there. So the level 2, the duration is 12 to 18 months, and a successful learner should be able to, at the end of their apprenticeship, know, understand and be confident in their responsibilities, demonstrate values and behaviours, treat people with dignity and respect, demonstrate effective communication, safeguarding, championing health and well-being, and working professionally. Now, I hope they're not all unfamiliar subjects to you. Care is care, and they are the subjects that you already see within the existing diploma. We'll talk about what's happening with that further on. But just to be clear, the on-programme element is a minimum of 12 months. You cannot put any learner through to endpoint assessment until 12 months and 1 day. So make use of the 12 months whilst the learner is on programme to ensure that they are prepared for the gateway and for the endpoint assessment. Okay, so that's the level 2. Now at level 2, you'll see within the standard, within the assessment plan, you will see the behaviours that the learner is expected to demonstrate continuously, and you'll see this on all the levels actually. This is your responsibility to ensure that the 6 C's, as they are called, the learner understands them, they understand how they apply to their job role, and they are able to articulate, because it becomes important as part of the endpoint assessment, because endpoint assessment is more of a interrogation of values and behaviours as well as competence. So always refer back, if you're doing an observation or discussion with a learner, always ask them to reflect which of their values that they demonstrated during that assessment or whatever. So you've really got to make them be familiar with these, really try and make sure that these 6 C's become almost like their Bible. They're able to talk about them all the time and able to reflect. Okay, so the level 2 program, the adult care worker, within the standard mandates the following requirement. It mandates that the learners do the level 2 diploma in health and social care. The employer group who put together the standards value the qualification, and they feel that it should be retained within the apprenticeship program. Now, if you are delivering other apprenticeship programs, you will be familiar that moving forward with the new standards, there is no mandatory requirement for a qualification in any standard. However, the Adult Care Trailblazer Group and the employer group argued that for this sector, it's vitally important that we retain the qualifications. Now, I'm sure most of you know that the Level 2 Diploma in Health and Social Care expires in December 2017. Now, we are working to replace that qualification. We work with Skills for Care, and Skills for Care have issued us with a new specification, a new guidance for us to complete, to create a new qualification. So from the 1st of January, this qualification mentioned here will be replaced by a Level 2 Diploma in Care. It will be a shared qualification between the adult care worker and the healthcare standard. Now, in healthcare, there is no mandatory requirement for a qualification, but the employers will choose, if they value, they will choose to use the qualification. So look out for that. We're finalising the content today, and we hope to sort of start having events where we can share with you the draft specifications from around August. So look out for future webinars, or certainly talk to your account managers to make sure you have that draft spec. The one thing I will say is the new specification in care is probably 90% the same as the diploma in health and social care. We have a new mandatory core. So there are 9 new mandatory units that relate to the standards. So again, subjects that you will be familiar with: communication, safeguarding, health and well-being, working professionally, main roles and responsibilities. So they will all be familiar to you, but the content is new, and the content maps gaps to the new mandatory content in the standard. So we hope to get those out to you by August at the latest, so you can start planning and preparing for the new qualification in January. Again, we talked about this just previously on the slides. Industry-specific requirements laid down by the employer group. Learner must have a DBS check prior to starting the programme, and the care certificate must be achieved as part of the apprenticeship standard. On-programme learning, maths and English at this level is level 1 functional skills. So again, the on-programme learning to you will be very familiar. It will be delivery of a diploma that you are familiar with, albeit the new diploma, I can guarantee you still will be familiar. Optional units that we use from within the new diploma are optional units that are already in the health and social care diploma. So again, familiar units to you, mental health units, dementia units, learning disability. So again, it's not going to be something that should cause you a lot of stress to change the new qualification. Okay, so looking at the lead adult care worker, now the things that I've just said for the level 2 standard, you will start seeing very familiar themes travel through for the level 3 and building on that knowledge, skills and competence that you've acquired at level 2. Again, minimum duration of 12 months. So you've got 12 to 24 months of being on programme. Again, you cannot put a learner through the gateway until 12 months and 1 day. So again, it's making sure that the learner is fully prepared to enter that gateway. And again, familiar themes here, successful learner will be able to know, understand and be confident in their job, demonstrate the right values and behaviours, dignity, respect, communication, safeguarding, health and well-being, working professionally. So very much the same subject areas as the level 2, but obviously at a slightly higher level, a slightly higher competence, more responsibility. And again, the 6 C's run through the heart of that. So again, making sure your learner is up to speed with these 6 C's, that they can confidently refer to them, because part of the endpoint assessment, the assessor will be talking to them and they will be asking them to reiterate, how did you demonstrate your values and behaviours? And if the learner is familiar with talking about how they demonstrated compassion, it will be of a massive help to them. Okay, and again, the level 3 on programme requirements, very similar as to what you've just seen for the level 2. At level 3, we've got the level 3 diploma in health and social care. Again, that will be replaced on the 1st of January by the level 3 diploma in adult care. And again, very similar to what you already know and deliver. There will be a new mandatory core, so that will have 9 mandatory units that relate to the standard at level 3. And again, the subject areas that we've just talked about, health and well-being, safeguarding, working professionally, treating people with dignity, all very familiar. We hope again to have these structures out to you by August, so you can start seeing at least the mandatory content to start preparing for that transition. I will be doing webinars around November time, I hope, where we can sort of launch the pre-publication spec, and then you can see everything that you will be needing to deliver from January onwards. Again, same requirements, DBS check, care certificate must be achieved as part of the standard. So before you put the learner through to the gateway, when they've completed the level 3 diploma, they must have completed the care certificate. And again, good old functional skills that we know and love. So that'll be at level 2 for your level 3 learners, which again is all very familiar to you. So assessment gateway, what is it? This is the completely new bit for you, the thing that you won't be familiar with. So the assessment gateway, the assessment plan, again, I hope you've all had sight of the assessment plan. The assessment plan states that before the learner is adjudged ready to undertake the endpoint assessment, which we abbreviate to EPA, by their employer and learning provider, they will need to have achieved the diploma. So at level 2 or 3, they need to have achieved whether it's a health and social care diploma or the new diplomas. They need to have completed the care certificate. They need to have achieved level 1 maths and English or level 2 as appropriate. In the last month of the apprenticeship, they need to undertake a self-assessment. Now, we are saying that's more of a reflective account, a reflection of what they've done whilst on programme, where they started, how they feel that they have progressed. It really is. It's almost like a diary, and there's no set rules. It's very personal to them. It's about their journey. And it really helps them to focus and understand, are they ready to go through to the next point, which is the endpoint assessment. Now that will be submitted to the independent assessor to help him or her prepare for the professional discussion. So they'll be able to draw on what the learners said in their reflection, how when they first started, they weren't able to communicate effectively with people. However, by demonstrating their values and behaviours, they're more confident and they're able to demonstrate compassion, whatever it is, that they write in this self-assessment, reflection, diary, whatever we want to call it. Also, before the learner can progress through to the endpoint assessment, it needs to be a decision that's made between the employer, you, the training provider, and the learner. Because at that point, what you're saying is that the learner, you believe that all of their knowledge, skills, and behaviours that they're required to attain the apprenticeship. So you've got to be really clear at that point that the learner is ready. If the learner's not ready, it's just further support, further guidance, further training. But if everything else has been done, they really should be. The endpoint assessment is really just about their job, about what they do, and it's being able to really articulate that to somebody else and how they meet the requirements of the apprenticeship standard. Okay, so endpoint assessment. So the endpoint assessment, so there's a register of apprenticeship training organisations who have been deemed as suitable to conduct independent endpoint assessment on an apprentice and be in receipt of public funds. So very much like the process that you go through with the SFA to get your adult skills budget, you have to go through a process and demonstrate that you are competent and capable. Any organisation who wishes to offer endpoint assessment has to go through that process. So we've been through that process for the level 2 and 3, the adult care worker and the lead adult care worker standard. We have been deemed, judged appropriate, that we have the relevant skills to conduct endpoint assessment. So what you need to be really clear on is within your apprenticeship programme that you only use an organisation who is on that register. They are the only people who are allowed to conduct the endpoint assessment for any standard that you wish. So you need to be working with your employer to select an organisation from the register to conduct your endpoint assessment. As I say, Pearson are on that register to deliver endpoint assessment for the level 2 and 3. When the level 4 and 5 standards are approved, we will go through the same process to ensure we can offer progression opportunities for all of the learners. So just a little slide really about the roles and responsibilities, and I know that you will all have access to these slides, so you are welcome to keep them and use them if you want to for internal training in your organisation. So just a summary. So the employer who you will now need to be heavily involved with on this learner's journey. So the employer's responsibility is to agree that a candidate is prepared and ready for that endpoint assessment. So you need to have clear conversations with the employer from your reviews, update, that learner is ready, that learner is not ready, they need further further support. They may be feeling a little bit vulnerable and nervous, particularly if English isn't their first language. They may feel they're going into a situation that is unknown to them and it nerves them. So really have those clear conversations. Now, you will have learners who have completed all of the on-program requirements. You will have some learners who you know straight away, within days, weeks, are ready for endpoint assessment because they're confident and they're not, they're feeling quite sort of confident and happy about it. You'll also have learners who are not feeling happy about it, who are feeling, as I say, a bit vulnerable, a bit scared of what's going to happen to them. So you need to make sure with the employer you have those clear conversations with the employer. Who is ready, who needs further support, etc. Because what you really don't want to do is push a learner to go through to that end point and they're really not ready and they fail, because that's really not what anybody wants. And the better prepared they are, the more familiar they are with what will happen to them, the better chance they have of achieving the overall apprenticeship. Now, the one thing that the employer can do is that part of the endpoint assessment is professional discussion. One thing the employer can do is they can participate in that professional discussion, but they have no role in the final grading. They're able to sit there to possibly make their learner feel a little bit more confident, especially if they're nervous. They can also, sort of prompt the learner and say, well, do you remember when you did this? Da, da, da. They can do that, but they can't then say to the independent assessor, oh, this is my employee is definitely a distinction. They have no influence and no role in that. So again, you as the learning provider, it is your responsibility to advise the employer on whether the apprentice is ready to undertake the components of the endpoint assessment. And it is highly likely that you as a learning provider will source an appropriate endpoint assessment organisation. The initial sort of thing with the Trailblazers was the employer was in control, but I think a lot of employers will prefer to hand that control over to you as the learning provider, and allow the fact that they think you will make the right decisions for them. So they will be your responsibilities. It's highly likely you will be expected to source an appropriate organisation. Okay, the endpoint assessment organisation, which I said Pearson is approved. So our responsibility is to devise and administer the components of the endpoint assessment and report to the Adultcare Apprenticeship Board, who will be the external quality assurance body. So we will report all of our findings. We will be governed, standardised by an external quality assurance body, much as we are for on-programme with Ofqual. We report and we're regulated by Ofqual for on-programme learning. For endpoint assessment, we will be regulated by the Adultcare Apprenticeship Board. They will be the external quality assurance. They are in the process of being set up. They will be an arm of Skills for Care. So we are retaining that professional development within our sector with Skills for Care. Okay, so just really looking a bit further at endpoint assessment, and as I say, all of the information that you need for endpoint assessment you will find in the assessment plan that supports the standard, and again, all freely available online on the DFE Gov website. Just to be really clear, Pearson have had no influence in the writing of this standard or this assessment strategy. Somebody got really cross the other day that they felt it was all too much and we were expecting far too much from the learners. But just to be clear, this is not Pearson as an awarding organisation have not created this assessment plan or these standards. We, very much the same as you, have to work with them and have to make sure that we do the best for our learners. So for both of the standards, we've got two distinct components. We've got a situational judgment test, which is answered through a multiple choice exercise, which is 60 questions. And again, if you looked in the assessment plan, it would clearly define to you that the situational judgment test presents candidates with a range of real life scenarios. So they have to make a judgment on those questions. An acceptable pass is 40 out of 60 correct answers. A good merit pass is 50 or more. An outstanding or a distinction pass is 55 or more out of 60 correct answers. So the situation is that we have any candidates who achieve between 25 and 39 questions. Unfortunately, that is a fail. Learners will be able to retake this test on one further occasion within 3 months. Candidates achieving fewer than 25 correct answers will not be able to retake the assignment until they've completed a professional review. So if you've got learners who achieved under 25, they need to go back through the system with you and the employer. You will be able to see how they responded to the questions. You will be able to make decisions on what to do from that point onwards, how much further learning they need, etc. Now, hopefully, we will have prepared the learner adequately, but as we all know, being in a test environment is not our natural position to be. A little bit like the driving test, the theory driving test. You know, once you get put in that scenario, your mind can go blank. So it's again, preparing the learner is really important. And I'll talk to you in a moment about ways in which we're helping to prepare the learner. But what I did want to do is, as an endpoint assessment organisation, we've been given guidance of how we create that test. So we've been given some guidance from the Adultcare Apprenticeship Board. I've just copied and pasted an exemplar question that we are expected to create further. Now this is at level 4, but I just wanted you to have sight of it so you can see the sorts of questions that the learner will be expected to answer. Now within that there is one correct answer, there's one plausible incorrect answer and 2 incorrect answers. So it's the plausible incorrect answer that we really need to look out for. So I'm just going to give you just 2 or 3 minutes to look at the exemplar question and just really have a think about that, and was it what you expected and how you think it's going to work. Okay, thank you. Okay, so hopefully that's given you all enough time just to have a look at that and realise that the situations won't be too unfamiliar in a care setting. Obviously, the exemplar that we've been provided with is for a level 4 learner. Now you can imagine at level 2 the test will be more relevant to a level 2 learner, but that's what the learner's going to be presented with. That's probably a little bit for my thinking. If you've got 60 questions in 60 minutes, it's quite a long question. So we're hoping that the questions will be a little bit more succinct in the information that allows them to make a quick decision of what the right course of action is, what the right values and behaviours are. So that's really what the situational judgment test will look like. It will be through a multiple choice exam online. All of our test conditions, exemptions, etc. that are already in place for learners, whether they're doing functional skills or whether they're doing the online version of the preparing to work in health and social care. All of those will apply. We do not want to disadvantage any learner in any way. So any dispensations that are required, you need to make sure that we are aware of those. If you have to be with the learner to read the question, etc., etc. As long as it falls within our current guidelines, for testing our learners, those will all apply. So do make sure that you are aware, particularly if you have learners with special requirements. The second part of the endpoint assessment is a professional discussion. Now, this professional discussion will be carried out with an independent assessor. So this will be somebody who the learner does not know, who has played no part in the learner's on program or current journey to where they are. So that professional discussion will be no more than 45 minutes in duration. And as I said, the employer can sit in on that professional discussion. They can't take over and talk for the learner, but they can be there just to, encourage the learner, or just if it's a learner who is so nervous, they would just feel better having a familiar face with them. The purpose of this professional discussion is really not to trip the learner up. Nobody is trying to, it's not like a job interview. It will be somebody who is very much the same as you are as assessors, who is looking at probably around 15 semi-structured sort of stimulus questions, 3 to 4 themes. Now they will be relevant to the learner. It will all be agreed beforehand. That they won't be coming in and asking questions or themes that the learner is not expecting. From receiving the learner's self-assessment or reflective journey, whatever it is, they will be able to structure discussion points. It may be that the learner referred to a situation that they dealt with. It might be a service user had a fall, or was ill and they had to act quickly. So it might be something around those that then the independent assessor will draw on that and say, tell me more, explain to me, how did you feel, how would you behave, what did you learn, how would you behave differently, what values, behaviours did you demonstrate? Again, going back to those 6 C's, where the learner needs to be really clear that they can articulate how they demonstrated care, compassion, how they communicated. It may be that they had to call an ambulance, etc., etc. So it's really meant to be a professional discussion, and it's around their job. It's not, there's no curveball of questions being something that the learner would not know. The learner is there talking about their job, talking about things they have done, and how they felt, etc., etc. Now, the situational judgment test, the learner is allowed one resit. There is no resit opportunity for the professional discussion. So the professional discussion, again, will be, as I say, 45 minutes. The independent assessor will grade that learner as a pass, merit, or distinction for that professional discussion. So it's a weighting of 50% of the overall grade. And then the overall grade will be calculated depending on the results from the situational judgment test. As I say, a learner cannot retake the professional discussion, but the employer group are really keen to emphasise that a learner shouldn't fail the professional discussion because they are talking about themselves. They are talking about themselves in their job role, and it's their opportunity for them to showcase how good they are, how proud they are to work in that sector. So it really shouldn't be something that they should fail. I'll go on in a moment to talk about resources that we're going to create to support you, to support the learner, to prepare for that professional discussion. Okay, so just really talking about the fee to provide both components. We've worked really hard to allocate a fee to this that is within the 20% allocation of the funding cap. There are lots of things we've had to consider within this fee. So the fee includes a mandatory payment per learner to the Adultcare, which is the EQA board. Now that's not per learner sampled, that's per learner who is carrying out endpoint assessment. The figure has not been approved yet, but it's around £40 to £50 per learner. So we've had to factor that in to the endpoint assessment cost. We've also had to factor in all the costs of training and standardisation for independent assessors to ensure we comply with the EQA board. They have very set requirements for how often standardisation needs to be carried out and what training the person needs to go through. So our figures for the level 2 and the level 3 are £600 per learner. So what I would suggest is that you speak to your account manager, because what we can also look at is partnership arrangements. So if you, as an FE college or a PTP, have another like-minded FE college PTP who work the same as you, have around the same kind of numbers, we could look at a partnership arrangement where we train and standardise your staff and their staff, and you both carry out the endpoint assessment, the professional discussion on each other's. We assume overall responsibility for that. We adhere to all of the Adultcare EQA board, and we assume overall responsibility. Standardisation and training is our responsibility, and we report back all of the endpoint assessment results to the EQA board. So please have a chat with your account manager, and also in a sense of the fee per learner, you need to look at, don't call us in to do one learner. If you could get a maximum of 3 learners together on one day for professional discussion, again, that will help you manage the costs of calling us in to maximise what we can do in one day. So do make sure you talk to your account managers about what we can do to support you in those costs. Okay, the other thing that we're working on at the moment is about resources to support you as trainers, learners who are going to be taking the endpoint assessment. Now these should be available from the summer. And what we're looking at, the situational judgment test that I showed you a moment ago, which is the exemplar one that's been provided with us, we're looking at creating exactly the same kind of things for levels 2 and 3, which will give an opportunity for you to use with the learner, so that they become familiar with situations and how to make judgments on them, and what are the right judgments to make, etc. You can use them on a one-to-one basis with the learners, or you can use them if you have a group of learners. If you're taking this, sort of off the job, sort of situations, questions, how to work that and how to look at that. It's a good opportunity to work in groups, because we found creating them, it creates a lot of discussion. And why that answer is the right answer, and really getting learners familiar with that plausible incorrect answer, because I think the plausible incorrect answer is the one that's going to throw them, and they need to be able to judge what makes it plausible but what makes it incorrect. And again, we're hoping that the information, the support materials that we provide will help them identify the difference between the two. We're creating videos for professional discussion. So I've seen the ones that we've created. We're working on the adult care. I've seen the ones that we've created for, I believe it was retail. So it's very much the independent assessor and the learner together having this professional discussion. What happens in the professional discussion, how it's structured and what happens. And we're really hoping that it will put the learner at ease to realise that it's not a job interview, it's not an interrogation, it's really sort of like the set stimulus questions talking about their job roles, and how they can refer back to things that they've done in the job role, because the independent assessor will have that information there. Tell me a little bit more about the time when Nell fell in the conservatory and all that you did to help her and support her. And again, the learner will go, oh yeah, well, what happened was. So it's really sort of getting them to draw on what they already know and done. Again, we're looking to create some audio content as an option. So it could be downloadable little pods where the questions put to them and the answers are put to them, and they can think about that as they're on the move. We're looking to produce PowerPoints to support you as trainers with guidance with the situational judgment test. We're also, when I talked earlier on about the self-assessment, self-reflection, we're also looking to produce reflective diaries as exemplar material. So this is really to encourage reflection as a daily activity and to aid them for that professional discussion. So we'll provide some content as exemplar, of what reflection looks like, and a learner reflecting on a certain scenario. Could be, encouraging them to do could be weekly diary entries of things that have happened at work and how they felt about it, and perhaps how it gave them confidence to move forward. Perhaps how then they sort of then went back to their manager and were concerned that they didn't know what to do in that situation and what further training they received, etc., etc. So it's really for us to be able to support you as learning providers to really make sure that that learner fully knows what the endpoint assessment components will be, and that they fully are ready, and that nothing that happens to them in that endpoint assessment will be a surprise or a shock. It will just be, oh yeah, I remember this, and I know, I've looked at this before, and to progress forward. So we're hoping that achievement rate will be good, because the key is to prepare that learner for that endpoint assessment, making sure that they are ready, making sure it's the right time for them. And we all know that things happen on a daily basis, that some learners who you would totally expect to pass that test for whatever reason may fail. And it's how we support and make sure we prepare them again. Okay, so I think that's mainly from me. I do have a question, I think. Will these be specific to the area of care, such as mental health issues that may arise in the professional discussion? So this relates to the resources. So yeah, we'll have a variety of resources. Although there are no pathways nowadays, we still want to remain true to the pathways, the generic, the mental health, the learning disability. So we're trying to make sure that we still cover those three areas, because we recognise that we'll still have learners in those areas. Although they're not doing pathways, they'll still be choosing optional units that are relevant to the environment that they work in. Okay, so thank you for attending today.